Well, they did it. They did it in turn, Joe. For the third time in program history, South Carolina women's basketball are your national champs. And just for the 10th time in the history of women's college basketball, we have a team that finishes the season undefeated. What a phenomenal performance today by South Carolina. Give credit to Iowa, certainly in the first quarter. Caitlin Clark comes out, scores 18 points in that first quarter, but the Gamecocks were able to make adjustments, and they were able to go on a roll throughout the rest of the game, and they were able to hold off the Hawkeyes, who made a late comeback in the fourth quarter. South Carolina goes on to get the win, 87-75, a phenomenal team performance. And, Joe, I think that's where I begin. You know, you can see behind me, we got the watch party down here at Home Team BBQ in Columbia. And there could be multiple players that could win this award, and we're talking about MVP. And I really think that speaks volumes of what we saw from the Gamecocks today. It was truly a team effort.
Yeah, my team effort up and down the board from South Carolina. I mean, shout out to Tessa Johnson, the freshman stepping up. Huge, right? Off the bench. This team is deep, right? We talked about it all year long, and it proves to be the depth that is too much for Iowa today. You know, you slow down Caitlin Clark. Mike, I mean, we said it pregame that they were going to give him a bunch of different looks, and then they wound up Raven Johnson guarding Caitlin Clark towards the end of the game. But, you know, very, very well executed game plan for South Carolina, and you're national champions. I mean, you have the perfect season under your belt, and now you can just enjoy it, right? As I'm sure everyone is doing out there in 5 points right now.
So I'm standing inside the patio section of Home Team BBQ. You have all the bars down here in 5 points. It reminds me of the 2017 Final Four year with the men and women. People are just storming out of the bars down here in 5 points, so they're hopping in to that 5 points fountain. Hopefully we'll have some video for you guys a little bit later on. But, I mean, that's the scene down here. Tremendous support across not just Columbia, but obviously going out towards Cleveland, going throughout the entire state of South Carolina. I know there's a lot of Gamecock fans that aren't in either of those states, throughout the entire country, and perhaps the world, looking at today's game. Dawn Saley, she picks up her third national championship as a coach, joins an elite class to be able to do that. When we went into this game, Joe, everything that we talked about that USC needed to do, it was the complete opposite early on. It was the complete opposite. Caitlin Clark, she was able to come out, she was able to make her shots, and give Iowa credit. They came out, they were ready to go. I understand, and I said it earlier. I felt like South Carolina was getting called for fouls just for friggin' breathing, for crying out loud, especially early in this game. What was just your assessment of just what we saw from South Carolina as the course of the game played out and as they were able to make adjustments?
Yeah, Mike. I mean, obviously you started slow. If you're South Carolina, you started flat, but you wound up winning this game. I would say halftime adjustments certainly carried over. Whatever Dawn has been saying to them, at halftime certainly worked. I mean, came out hot, and then Iowa caught fire a little bit there. Started chipping away at that lead, but again, it was the depth that took over in that second half. In that first quarter, I mean, you just got to get back to your bread and butter. I mean, they were playing a little tight, but I mean, when Camilla hit that shot, this team guys are like, here we go, right? We put the ball through the bucket, and we can do this. And so they just stayed with it. They were disciplined on defense, Mike. That was the biggest thing, right? You continued to just get in Clark's face, get through the screens. Help defense was the biggest thing here. And the fouls too, Mike. I mean, I will touch on that. Yeah, the hand check fouls on Clark. I mean, she's going to get those superstar calls, but it was a little touch and go early. So I mean, it made the difference. And then I mean, obviously, again, it evens itself out certainly. But yeah, I mean, that was interesting to see. But then again, South Carolina, they were just above that too, right? They were able to fight through that. They didn't let the fouls and the storyline within the game kind of get to them, right? They didn't get rattled. Really, you didn't really see a whole lot as the game progressed, right? And that's experience, that's depth, that's all of it, right? And to have Tessa Johnson have the game that she did in the national championship, truthfully, Mike, are you kidding? And I brought it up a little bit on the pregame show. But my money was certainly on Wiley, but Tessa Johnson, I mean, she's a natural born scorer. To be a true freshman and to have a game like that, I mean, that's the future right there, ladies and gentlemen. And then I mean, Kitts, Watkins were both great. Just really, really big team effort here for South Carolina, and I mean, impressive as heck, man.
You see some of the stats, as Joe alluded to. What a performance by Tessa Johnson, and some of the things that won't show up And the stat sheet is what she was able to do defensively, and it was a true team effort. I mean, you saw early on, you had Chloe trying to stop Caitlin. I mean, they were changing things up. They continue to make things difficult. You saw Bree Hall on her, continuing trying to get that hand in her face, making it difficult for Clark not only to shoot the basketball, but to be able to dish it out because, as we mentioned before the game, yes, she is a phenomenal scorer, averaging over 30 points a game, but at the same time, too, averaging just under 10 assists a game as well. And it made things challenging. Throughout the course of the game, USC was able to make some adjustments, and they were able to hold them off in the end. But, again, just looking at some of those stats from this game today, Joe, it was a true team effort. I mean, you mentioned Tessa coming off the bench, 19 points. That's another thing, too. That's another thing with the South Carolina team that we've talked about so many times. What made this team so special in comparison to some other teams that we've seen in the past at South Carolina or throughout college basketball this season. And that's just being able to have a bench as deep as they have. I mean, we mentioned it before in the pregame show today. One of the things that Iowa didn't have to worry about with UConn was the fact that UConn was only playing with 7 players. So, yes, UConn was able to have a great game plan early on in that Final Four matchup 2 days ago. They were able to take a lead against Iowa, but guess what? Started to get tired. They started to get tired later in the game. South Carolina, it's kind of like it was a complete flipping of the switch, flipping of the tables. You know, tables got flipped up on them because guess what? Iowa now, they're going up against a team that's so much deeper. And it felt like as the game went on, Iowa was able to hang around, but it just seemed like Iowa, especially midway through that third quarter, it looked like they kind of got gassed. And that was really the opportunity for South Carolina to take advantage. You saw them drilling some big threes. You saw Darius Rucker enjoying it out in Cleveland. It felt like that's really when the game started to change. It was obviously a phenomenal second quarter, be able to bounce back after having a sluggish first quarter and some of those calls not necessarily going your way early in the game. But USC, they didn't complain. They didn't feel sorry for themselves. They didn't put their head down. They just kept going to work. And one thing, too, that really stands out in this game is the number of fouls called, you know, one way versus the other. Look, South Carolina, they didn't get the same amount of foul calls, especially early in the game. I know towards the end, Iowa trying to keep the game close, but USC, despite that, they were able to still really dominate the beginning of that second half and were able to find a way to control it and finish it out in the fourth quarter.
Sure, Mike. And again, it was the guards. And again, you know, they controlled the rebounding battle too. If you're South Carolina, you had 2 starters in double digits for rebounds and Kitts and Cardoso. Kitts finishing with a double-double, 11 points, 10 rebounds, and then Cardoso 15 points, 17 boards. Really good stuff out of those two. Watkins had a little bit of foul trouble, but still nabbed 5 boards for herself, 3 points for her as well. So really good. And then Sanaya Fagan as well. She played really good defense, right, Mike? I think Fagan was an underrated part as well. You know, missed a shot early and then battled back, right, to make a couple key stops here as that game progressed. So really good stuff out of, you know, the 9 that went today for South Carolina. You know, you had 4 of them in double figures, which is craziness. And then it happens to be your true freshman point guard on the bench leads them all. I think, you know, when we were talking about this team playing with house money after the Cardoso shot, I think this game is ever more proof of that, right? Tessa Johnson leading all scores, and then you have Cardoso and Kitts leading the way defensively and on the boards too. So really good stuff. It was a great team effort, right? And that it would have required to beat a team like Iowa, and got the job done today, Mike.
You see me turning around. I'm going to step out of the way so you guys can take a look here at the official Garnet Trust watch party at Home Team BBQ in Columbia down in 5 Points, as there's been a lot of people that have made their way out towards the fountain to jump in that 5 Point fountain like we saw back in 2017 when the men's and women's teams had their incredible runs. And, of course, just 2 years ago, there was a lot of people jumping in a different fountain, the one down the street, but down here with beautiful weather here at 5 Points. But you see so many fans still in here watching Don Staley and the team receiving their trophy. So we appreciate you guys tuning in to watch the post-game show as we try our best to recap what this game was and trying to put it into words. I mean, it's difficult to, simply because this team was able to do something that before today had only been done 9 times in women's basketball history. They are just the 10th team. Think about that. Just the 10th team in women's basketball history to go undefeated in a season and win a national championship. Dawn Staley has had some incredible years since she arrived at South Carolina. Some incredible years. There's been championships prior to this year. But this season, certainly her best work. And when you look at being able to win the Naismith Coach of the Year award again, the AP Coach of the Year award again, sometimes when you're in these situations where you have a team that's so dominant, some people say, well, why should that coach win that award? That's what they should do. If you pay attention to women's basketball, if you pay attention to what South Carolina lost a year ago, the number of talented players that were drafted, the freshies, as we refer to them as, the fact that they were able to get new faces on the court in that starting 5, they were able to bring in some new faces today like Tessa Johnson this season and what she was able to do today as a freshman, the job that Malaysia Folabi was able to do this season as well, the fact that they were able to do that as quickly as they were able to make it happen, that is why Dawn Staley is your Coach of the Year. That is why what they were able to accomplish this season is hands down, the greatest job she has ever done as a coach. Maybe you could argue the beginning stages, because I don't want to overlook the foundation of this, where this program was built, because it wasn't always this way. It was not always this way of South Carolina making it to the Final Four and being able to compete for national championships. But certainly, since that 2017 season, this is what we've grown accustomed to seeing. This is what we're used to. And now, Joe, you talked about in pregame, USC has an opportunity next year. We'll have plenty of time to talk about it in the offseason. They have a chance next season to be a dynasty. And in college sports, it's always one of those funky things, like how do you classify a dynasty? Because unlike pro sports, you have the majority of your players could still be there in that 2, 3 year, 4 year span. It changes a lot. And I think that's what makes today just so special for this program and everything that they had to deal with in the last 12 months.
Yeah, Mike, it's again the fact that this team was doubted this season, but again in perfect fashion, the true freshman and Tessa Johnson things. You were playing with house money after Camila Cardoso banked in that 3 in the SEC tournament, and then you struggled a little bit during the NCAA tournament. You weren't on your game. This was it, Mike. This was, if you wanted to prove, your dominance and reestablish yourselves as the dynasty in college basketball, this was your chance to do it. And boy, did they ever. I mean, it's crazy what this team was made of. And, this is just a start. And like I said, because Tessa Johnson cooking, you have Malaysia Fulwiley coming back, Pau coming back, Watkins, the list goes on. Large portion of this roster. And then as well, you have, recruits coming in too. So, the Queens are going to be back to defend the crown most certainly, but, you got to give credit where credit's due. And I'm sure they're going to have a great time this week celebrating. And the parade down Main Street should be a good one.
No, certainly no question about that. We will have plenty of times to talk about the parade coming up. And assuming based on what we've seen in the past, this will be a parade that will probably be on Tuesday, maybe Wednesday. We've seen in the past where it has been at night. That was the case 2 years ago. So we're going to have to wait and see what South Carolina does. I mean, with everything that goes on in this state and around the state. I mean, it's Masters weekend, of course, coming up. So I would think that this parade will be during the weekend. I wouldn't be shocked with the turnout 2 years ago at night for this to be a night parade. But we'll wait and see. We got some time to worry about that in the next, I'd say, 24, 36 hours. I'm sure we'll find out fairly soon. Let's go to the other side of things, Joe. I mean, we talked about the job that Caitlin Clark did throughout this tournament. I mean, obviously she got tripped up a little bit in that UConn matchup, but we knew going into this game it was all about having to stop Clark. And she played 40 minutes. Marshall played 40 minutes. Martin played 40 minutes. They only played 7 players. And when we talked about it before with players getting gassed, and I felt like Iowa got gassed, that's one of the reasons why they don't, not a lot of teams do, but they don't have the bench like South Carolina. They don't have the depth like South Carolina. And as this game played out, especially, as I mentioned, midway through the third quarter, it really felt like that's when the game started to change. You started to see USC control the tempo the way that they want to. And with Iowa, a team that defensively has struggled this season. I mean, let's just call it for what it is. This is a team that has really struggled defensively this year. But you combine the fact that they were tired, I think that was really what changed the game.
No, Mike. I mean, it really was. The depth, 100%. And again, I think the way that South Carolina played offensively, they kept their foot on the gas pedal, right? I think that's exactly what you needed to do. And I think it was Lynn that was making the point in here that they, you really needed to do that. And just kind of wear them out, right? Kind of what they tried to do with Aaliyah Boston last year and look at foul trouble and stuff like that. So, similar where you just, they don't play a whole lot and you force them to kind of chase the game a little bit where they have to leave their starters in for a little bit longer. And so that helps you out a lot. And when you have, 4 players that came off for South Carolina all played really good minutes. And again, your leading scorer was off the bench in Tessa Johnson. That's really good stuff. And that's what, makes a dynasty a dynasty. It's just continued greatness over and over and over. And so, credit to Tessa again, coming off the bench, and everyone who came off the bench, again, could probably start a lot of other places in the country, but, choosing to play at South Carolina and winning national championships.
Anything else that stood out to you? I mean, I felt like Chloe did some good things. I mean, she was asked to go out there and guard Caitlin at times out on the perimeter. I mean, she's not used to playing that far out. I mean, she's used to playing inside, close to the paint, or pretty much, perimeter in. In this case, she was playing perimeter to half court, like a lot of teams have to when you go up against Caitlin Clark. And I thought at times she did a good job. It's challenging. I know that she got called for a foul early on, but I mean, again, as I mentioned earlier, I felt like South Carolina, there were a lot of those calls that were ticky-tacky. That one in particular, you get. But again, that's because you have a player that's not used to being out there. And I thought she did a real good job considering the circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, most definitely. And, again, Mike, you mentioned it a little bit. Raven wasn't able to get her, offensive game going as much as she wanted because, again, she had that primary focus. It's hard to go, both ways for that long guarding the best player in the country, right? So to be able to have success on the offensive end, it's going to be a little bit more challenging for Raven tonight. But, again, Tessa getting it done. And, Raven did a really, really, really good job defensively on Caitlin Clark. It was the best we had seen so far, at least for somebody guarding Caitlin Clark yet this year. So got to give credit where credit's due. And, that was really the spark that this team needed, right? Because then Cardoso and Watkins and Kitts had everything locked down in the paint. Whenever they tried to go down in the paint, South Carolina had an answer for it. So it really came down to was Caitlin Clark going to, torch you? And Raven Johnson and the platoon of guards that were on Clark all night, made sure that didn't happen.
No question about it, Joe. If you're just joining us or you've been under a rock for the last, 2.5 hours, South Carolina, they win their 3rd national championship in program history, holding off the Iowa Hawkeyes 87-75. It was a game of runs, just like basketball typically is. Iowa was able to jump out to a first quarter lead, led behind Caitlin Clark, setting a new record for the tournament for most points scored in a quarter by a player, scoring 18 points. She was red hot, but as the game went on, South Carolina, they made adjustments led by Dawn Staley, and the players executed. And I think that's what needs to be mentioned over and over again. We know how talented and how special Dawn Staley is as a coach. There's no question about that. And I'm sure she would be the very first to say, it doesn't matter how good of a coach you are. If you don't have players that can go out there and execute, it doesn't matter. She had players go out there and execute. She had veterans. She had freshmen. She had players in between that step up today. And as Joe mentioned, being able to get the performance that you did from Tessa, you were able to also receive 25 minutes from her as well. I mean, it just speaks volumes of what she was able to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Volumes upon volumes. And again, this is how you build a dynasty, right? This is really how you do it. It's the freshman Tessa Johnson coming off the bench, doing what she does, right? And then Watkins having a decent day as well. Watkins, it didn't have the best days on the boards or on the glass. She's had better days in the tournament, but again, really, 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 really good stuff. From everybody, top to top. I mean, I think this was one of the most complete games that this team had played all year, Mike. I think that's fair to say. And to win in 12 points in a national championship game where you have a perfect season, like usually perfect seasons don't end like that. Like, right, they usually end on maybe a couple free throws down to the wire. They don't win, or don't end up by 12, right? So that's putting their stamp on it, a statement win, and a big season, signed, sealed, delivered.
Signed, sealed, delivered. Now, another thing too, we talked about it before the game, and it will get more attention these next couple days, and then it will die down just like anything in life. But the press conference yesterday with Dawn Staley, we talked about this in pregame. There's been circumstances in the past where South Carolina has been in the middle of getting prepared for a national championship, and you have a story that has nothing to do with the actual game, the X's and O's, to put the ball in the hoop. And there's important conversations out there, and there's a time and place. There's a time and place. And like we talked about in the pregame, there's a time and place to talk about that. But yet, for these players, especially the ones that are upperclassmen, this is it. I mean, some of these underclassmen, we'd love to hope that they can get back to a situation to be able to play for a national championship, but it might be their only opportunity. Go ask Asia Wilson. Go ask Aaliyah Boston. These things aren't guaranteed. So we went back and we talked about it in pregame, Joe. One thing that this team has been saying all season long, it goes back even the last couple of years. Keep the main thing the main thing. Keep the main thing the main thing. And that's exactly what they did today. They kept the main thing the main thing, and that was being able to go out there, play for a national championship, and don't let anything off the court impact the way you have to perform. Again, I'm not downplaying any of those conversations, but when we're talking about a national championship game, it has no impact on the X's and O's and putting the ball in the friggin' hoop, okay? So this team today, they ignored all that. They were able to come out and they were able to play their game, and they were able to do something that will be remembered now forever. As South Carolina becomes just the 10th team in women's basketball history to complete a season undefeated with a national title, and it is also the third national championship in program history for the Gamecocks. Joe, we're going to hit some ads real quick, and then we're going to keep the show rolling a little bit tighter of a show today so that you guys can go on out and enjoy this victory by the Gamecocks.
Yeah, certainly, Mike. Our first ad today is our good friends over at Liberty Tax. Tax IDs sort of get right before doing your taxes, but you don't have to go through it alone. Tax team at Liberty Tax in Irmo, Lexington, and Columbia will walk you through the process, clear up any confusion, and guarantee you'll get the biggest possible refund or your money back. It's tax time. If you're in a hurry for a refund, call on the tax team at Liberty Tax. They're fast, accurate, and guaranteed. On the other hand, if you think you might be on Sam, talk to the Liberty Tax team to make sure you're not paying more than you should owe. They'll find every possible deduction for you. Locally owned and operated, staffed by tax professionals from your neighborhood. Open 9 to 9 on Mondays and 9 to 5 on Saturdays with multiple service options. Start through the Liberty Tax mobile app or through the desktop portal. Make an appointment or just walk in to the call to upload your tax documents. When you come in, ready to review and sign. Give them a call on your screen right now. And for those listening, 803-462-5576. Once again, on your screen right now. And for those listening, 803-462-5576 for all of your tax needs this tax season. Mike?
And today's show is also brought to you by our good friend Clint Hammond over at Movement Mortgage. If you're in the process of purchasing a home, you're trying to find the lowest rate in the market, or you're just trying to make that process just easier, well, do what Wes Mitchell did. Do what former Gamecock quarterback and captain Perry Ort did. They reached out to Clint Hammond, and that number is 803-771-6933. Longtime supporter of Gamecock Central, as well as the main sponsor for every GC Live show. Joe, you can see some players behind me. Look at this. I want to come on in, man.
Go Gamecocks.
Hunter Rogers over here. Gamecock. Snapper. Man, what'd you think about that performance?
I was a little nerve-wracking to begin with, but I knew we'd pull it off. That's just us. This is a great day here, and just excited for the whole city of Columbia and all the Gamecock fan base. This is good to bring it back home, and go Gamecocks.
All right, one last question. I won't hold you up. He's just here today with Garnet Trust. It was an awesome event. You're a local guy. You've seen what Don Staley's been able to do the last couple of years. How neat is it, though, to see one of your local teams, especially the school that you play at, be able to just be one of the powerhouses in college women's basketball?
Well, first of all, like I've grown up, lived in Columbia, South Carolina for my entire life. So years of experience with the university and just growing a love for it since I was young. It's just amazing to see what Dawn Staley has done and what she's continued to do throughout time. I mean, ever since she got here 10 plus years ago. I just remember the first experience I had with the women's basketball team was probably Asia Wilson days. Like that's when we started being a powerhouse. And ever since then, we've just caught fire and just kept it lit. So it's just nice to see it going. I mean, before the season, people weren't really thinking we were going to be it, but we were. And it's cool to see it come to a finish right here.
Here we go, and hopefully it'll be the case soon for football, man. I know spring football's moving around.
Yep.
I appreciate it. Hunter Rogers, man, joining us on the broadcast. We've had a bunch of former and current athletes. I mean, if I say former, Corey Miller's over there. Dante Reno came on by. Cam Pringle was here as well. It was neat to see so many of these Gamecocks out here today. Joe, before we wrap things up here, get you back on here, just want your thoughts on what this season means for South Carolina, because you heard it from Hunter. We talked about it in pregame. It would have been very understandable to say, well, this team could be reloading this year. You know, this team's probably going to reload. They lost a lot of talent from a year ago. They lost the freshies, a lot of players that were drafted last season. Maybe they'll make it to the Sweet 16. Maybe they'll make it to the Elite Eight. Give some of these younger players a chance to develop, and then, you know, maybe in 2025 they'll make it back to the Final Four. That wasn't the case. And not only that, not only do they make it back to the Final Four, not only do they win a national championship, but they don't lose a game all season. What can this do for the future of this program, especially when you mentioned the performance by Tessa, Malaysia, Watkins? There's so much young talent on this team. Pow Pow's coming back next year. I mean, shoot, we're going to have plenty of time to talk about it, but I think before we know it, we're going to be talking about a team that could potentially be getting ready to run it back, trying to repeat.
Yeah, most definitely, Mike. You know, I guess my final thoughts from this one, unbelievable. I mean, this team stood on business throughout the year, right? After being told, oh, there's no way they're going to keep this up. Oh, there's no way that they, you know, are going to complete the perfect season. They've got to face Caitlin Clark or LSU or Beckers. There's no way, right? So this team has defied all odds and done exactly what they said they were going to do. Perfect season intact, right? You know, you may have had some slip-ups, some bad basketball along the way, but you got the job done, right? In ending with a national championship against Caitlin Clark, the best player, you know, we've seen in generations in college basketball, and to win by 12 is just, you know, ever more so putting stamp on this one, right? And Dawn Staley gets her third ring, which is huge. And again, the parade is going to be sweet. Whenever they take the down Main Street, it's always a good time. And you know, when we win, we jump in fountains. Not at T-Coop, but to those that did, congratulations to you. Please continue celebrating, as I'm sure a lot of Gamecocks out there will. But you know, congratulations to the team. You know, they worked their butts off, and they certainly deserve every last bit of celebration and praise. And you know, when we get looking towards next year, come ready. They have a title to defend now, and so have more motivation to hold on to it.
Yeah, I think when you look at just the talent on this team, we've talked a lot about we've been naming it. There's a lot of talent from this state. And Dawn has done a phenomenal job of making sure that those players don't leave. And I think that's another thing, too. I think it's easy to take for granted the fact that Dawn has been able to put together some of the best recruiting classes consistently year after year after year. I mean, they're either number 1, 2, 3. They're in the top 5, it feels like, every year. But it's not just that. It's not just being able to have the top classes. It's when there's a talented player from the state of South Carolina, making sure that they don't go anywhere, making sure that they don't leave the state, because there's some talented schools out there. There's some talented schools, and to make sure that they don't leave, it's important. And I think we can point back to the days of Asia Wilson deciding to stay in state, because at that time, it was, there were some players before her. Dozier decided to stick around. There's some talented players that decided to stick. But at that point, though, it felt like things started to begin to change. And then you see the championship. And at that point, it's like, wait, if Asia does it, I can do that. I want to stay home. And obviously, there's been talented players that aren't from the state of South Carolina who have come in. And we can look at this year's roster, right? We can look at Pow Pow. We can go down the list. You can go back a couple years ago. Aaliyah Boston coming in, Bree Beal. We can just keep mentioning name after name after name. But the whole point being is when there are talented players in state, Dawn has made sure they don't leave. And I think it's one thing where it can be really easy to take it for granted, because it's like, well, South Carolina has a hell of a program. They have a great coach. Why wouldn't you want to stay home? That's not always the case for every player. Not every player wants to follow the blueprint that Asia Wilson put out, as crazy as that sounds. Some people want to make their own story. But at the same time, too, when you do it in the way that Asia did it, and the success she's having now at the next level, and the success that the players after Asia has had, it makes it difficult to say, why wouldn't you want to be part of something like that? Why wouldn't you want to follow that blueprint? Because not only are you going to set yourself up to have success in college, but you're going to be able to set yourself up to have success professionally and, more importantly, in life once basketball ends. So I think that's the biggest thing that stands out to me, is that she's done a great job of making sure that local talent stays. And this fan base is incredible. We already know that. It's been that way for many, many years. But when you have the local stars here too, I mean, that just gives you that extra juice for a fan base to say, all right, that's one of our own.
Most definitely, Mike. The Dawn Dynasty is here. Nick Babb says, yeah, it's a dawn of a new dynasty, or not necessarily a dawn of an old dynasty, if you will. They've reclaimed their thrones, the queens of college basketball. And, all credit to Dawn Staley. Again, this is her, brainchild. This is, her thing, her program, her dynasty. All credit to where it's due for turning this thing into what it is. And again, for Gamecock Nation showing out for it and giving women's basketball what it deserves, because they've really worked hard for this, and certainly for the perfect season and everything. All of it going into place, and the puzzle's complete. The dynasty has arrived again, and so back on top of college basketball, Mike.
Back on top of college basketball, and Joe, we talked about it too in the pregame show. Dawn Staley having that interview with Aaliyah Boston following the win against North Carolina State on Friday, and this is before they knew that they were playing Iowa. But she told Aaliyah, and I'm paraphrasing, that they wanted to be able to get the job done, win a national championship for them, finish the perfect season, and they wanted to be able to get rings for those freshies. Of course, they were part of that national championship team back in 2022, but it just speaks to the importance that group had on this year's team too, right? I mean, they're not even physically there, but the impact that they had, and just the way that they were able to help the underclassmen to be able to develop. And obviously Cardoso, not an underclassman last year, but being able to have Cardoso learn from someone like Aaliyah and be able to continue to help the other players that are going to be in the situation that they were today. I mean, you can't overlook that. And I think that's another important part of it all is you have players that come in here and they're all the best from across the country. And yet they continue to buy into the system that Dawn has. We've seen some players decide to leave. Sanaya Rivers, I mean, there's different reasons why players leave. But some players, they can't, it's tough for them to come off the bench. It's tough. It's not easy, especially when you've been one of the best players at your high school, your city, whatever the case may be, your state, for as long as you can remember. And now you're in a situation where you have people that are equally, if not more talented around you. And now you have a different role. So I think it speaks volumes to not only the way that Dawn sells the program, but for the way the players buy in and the way the upperclassmen give that boost to the underclassmen, saying, hey, stay with it. Stick to the program. Trust me, it will be worth it. Cardoso, she could have easily left. She could have easily gone to a different school. That wasn't the case. And she had a big impact the last couple seasons. She made a big impact this season and again today as well. And we're going to wrap things up, keep it short for you guys so you can go out there and enjoy South Carolina winning another national championship. Dawn Staley and the Gamecocks, a third-time national champion as they complete the perfect season, something that's only been done now 10 times in women's basketball history. He's Intern Joe. I'm Mike. You've missed any of our shows today, pregame, postgame. Maybe you want to go back and listen to it just for some smiles. Head on over to the Gamecock Central YouTube page, subscribe for free, keep a little bell notification icon, and you'll be able to get every video and every GC Live show directly to your phone, or you can also watch it on your smart TV. Or if you're a podcast listener, head on over to the Gamecock Central Podcast Network, where you can catch these shows as well as the 107.5 The Game, Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, and the Garnet Trust Hour as well. We appreciate everyone that tuned in throughout the entire season. It's been a fun year. The Gamecocks, national champions once again. He's Intern Joe. I'm Mike Yuva. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday and enjoy being national champions once again, Gamecock Nation.